Welcome to this webinar, hosted by SA United Employers. Additional information with regards to the various topics will be posted in the chat box to the right of the video and presentation. You may also ask questions by making use of the same chat box. Your questions, however, will not appear in the chat. They will be recorded, collated, and answered in due course. You will receive an email with the answers to the question not answered in the presentation. The webinar recording and presentation will be available at the end of the webinar.
Good day, members, colleagues and visitors. Welcome to this webinar on how to stay afloat during the lockdown period, especially for businesses. The webinar overview, we will deal with an overall summary of financial relief schemes available to businesses. We'll look specifically at three categories: labor-related schemes, tax incentive schemes, and other aid schemes. We will deal with each one of those categories separately. Purpose of this webinar is to determine if your company qualifies for financial aid schemes, and then look at the guidelines on the applications and requirements of those schemes. The financial relief is as a result of the national disaster and the subsequent lockdown as declared by the state president. As a result of this lockdown, there were regulations issued by the ministers within their specific mandates. This included some relief schemes, and those are the relief schemes we will look at today. You were issued with a financial relief summary, a COVID-19 Financial Relief Summary document, which contains all 9 schemes that we're going to deal with today. This document and the other documents are for informative purposes only, and it is not deemed to be advice. It deals with various categories of relief schemes: the labor, which means labor-related, such as TERS, UIF, WCA, the tax schemes, pay-as-you-earn, ETI, provisional tax, and other schemes. And in the other schemes also, we've got information on a private fund. Please be advised that this is information gathering, and whatever information you receive, rely on published information from reliable sources only. So we want to advise you, when you get a document, make sure that it's an authentic document. You can search also for other webinars such as SAAA, which is the South African Accountant Academy, and ACTS Online, or you may even consult with your accountant, your financial advisor, or even your organizer from SA United Employers Organization. First category that we are going to look at would be the labor-related schemes. So these are schemes coming from the labor relations portion. So the first one that we're going to deal with, we already did a full webinar on this application. It's the TERS application. If you have missed that, you're welcome to check our YouTube channel, which will be available, the details available at the end of this presentation. So the TERS stands for the Temporary Employer-Employee Relief Scheme, which was put in place specifically for COVID-19, the lockdown period. And this is for employers that have to enforce lockdown, but they require financial assistance. They simply can't continue paying employees during this time. So the payment through this scheme is for employees through the employers, which means the money will be paid to the companies and the companies will pay the employees for the loss of income during this period of lockdown. The second category is your UIF category. Now, normal benefits will apply for illness, reduced working time, and death during or as a result of COVID-19. It has to be as a direct result of COVID-19. It's payable to all employees who qualify for this, and it's a normal UIF application, and the procedure will apply. You will recall that on the UI19 declaration at the bottom, we have codes, reason codes, and you need to complete your document with a relevant code. For instance, in the case of illness, it will be a code 10, and in the case of reduced work time, it will be a code 17. Remember, illness in this case also covers self-quarantine. So once again, please refer to the previous webinar relating to TERS UIF benefits. Another category where there will also be a webinar available would be the claims through the compensation fund. Its special dispensation was proclaimed for COVID-19 cases arising out of and in the course of employment. This claim process is dealt with in detail in the webinar, and which is also available on the YouTube channel. There are also various tax incentive schemes. First one we're going to look at is the pay-as-you-earn tax relief, which is designed for companies with a turnover less than 50 million rand per annum. Now remember, SMMEs are also classified in terms of the threshold amounts as published by the Department of Small Business Development. But in this case, the qualification cap is 50 million. Turnover has to be less than 50 million. So it makes provision for delayed payments. So you may retain 20% of your pay as you earn, and then there are delayed payments declared. Also, it's without penalties and interest, but it's only for tax compliant businesses. Viewers, we did provide you also with a flow chart on how to qualify for this and the benefits and the documents required. Please refer to the flow chart that we have provided. Similarly, so for the provisional tax measures, once again, there is a flow chart that we've provided you with. You may check that flow chart, go through that, and check whether you qualify or not. Once again, for turnover less than 50 million, only companies for turnover less than 50 million. Once again, delayed payments stretching over a year, without penalties and interest, but again, only for tax compliant businesses. We also want to advise you that the regulations for private individuals who pays provisional tax has not been published yet. So please keep an eye out for that in the media when that is published. The next one is the ETI tax measure. So we also refer to this as the youth scheme. Now this dates back to 2014, and it's only for companies who is an existing ETI scheme participant, which means you can't join now. ETI stands for the Employment Tax Incentives of 2014, and you will qualify for payment of additional amounts for the next 4 months. So the employees will receive additional amounts. One of those categories would be an extra 500 Rand per month, but please also check the flow chart handout for further information. There are also various other aid schemes that has been provided by various other instances. And in this case, the first one is the SMME Debt Relief Fund. This is only for SMMEs. Here, you will work according to the threshold as per the Department of Small Business Development, where they declare and regulate the various income thresholds. It's also interesting to note that preference will be given to women, to youth, and people with disabilities. There are also further specific qualification requirements. Once again, it's all dealt with in the flowchart handout, which you have received previously. The next one is an interesting one, and this is the first one of the private funds. This one is called the SAFT Fund, which is the SA Future Trust Fund. This was the money donated by Nikki and Jonathan Oppenheimer, the 1 million Rand. Important to note here, very interesting, this is the first type of scheme that caters for sole proprietors, which means your company doesn't have to be registered. In all the other categories, it has to be a registered company, registered with CIPC. This is a private fund administered by Nedbank, Absa, Standard Bank, and FNB. So only the 4 big banks. And you have to be a client of that bank. It's in the form of an interest-free loan for 5 years. And it's only for companies with a turnover less than 25 million. So remember, the previous requirements of 50 million or even the threshold of the Department of Small Business Development is not applicable here. This is for companies with a turnover less than 25 million rand. There are other qualification and supporting document requirements. It is available on the flow chart on the handout, and you may use that as a checklist to see whether you qualify or not. Then we have the bank-specific relief. The Department of Trade and Industry passed new regulations for the banking industry, which includes that the banks may offer payment holidays, which gives you a breather for a month or 2, 3, not to pay your debt. So this is bank-specific, so you may contact your bank for further information on this. And I would also just like to remind you that, remember, you might have credit insurance for specific cases like the lockdown where you cannot trade. Contact your bank for information. In conclusion, I'd like to remind you that you have to consider all relief schemes and see where you fit in. And maybe there's more one scheme applicable to you, whether it's the labor-related schemes, with the UIF, your TERS, and your compensation fund, whether it's your tax incentive schemes, with the ETI, the provisional tax, and the pay-as-you-earn, or the other schemes. It might be the private scheme, the SAFT scheme. But please go and check and use the flow charts and the checklist to see whether you qualify for that or not. I want to thank you for watching this, and also a word of thanks to all my colleagues out there who has provided me with all the information, support, and to my office during this time.
If you have any other questions, please feel free to ask them now. Your questions will, however, not appear in the chat. They will be recorded, collated, and answered in due course. You will receive an email with answers to the questions not answered in the presentation. thank you for your participation in the webinar.